This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guests only. The content here should not be taken as medical advice and is for informational purposes only. And because each person is so unique, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Welcome to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces. Linda Mazur, Jack Mazur, and Ellen Bennett are three fierce advocates, two moms and a dad who are passionate about changing the way eating disorders and mental illness are viewed in our society. Linda, Jack, and Ellen believe we need to stop the stigma, band together, and help people find resources and support early on. They advocate to foster awareness, enhance education, and improve treatment, as well as to help society understand and embrace individuals and families who are affected by eating disorders and all mental health conditions.
Welcome to Once Shattered, Picking Up the Pieces. We are here to share who we are, why we are here, and why this podcast is so important to us. We're going to begin the conversations that need to happen because everyone's mental health matters. There are so many common threads woven through all mental illnesses. The focus today is getting to know us, two moms and a dad that lost an adult child to anorexia. We were once shattered, and now we are picking up the pieces. I am Linda Mazur, and my co-hosts are my husband and roommate, Jack, and our dear friend and fellow advocate, Ellen Bennett.
Hello.
Hello, and I'm so glad to be with you two today. This is just a very important time in our lives to continue this journey that we've been on since we lost our daughters. And it's not a place that I thought I would be at this point in my life, but it's a place that I have to be, and I'm glad to be here. So thank you for joining us today. Linda found a quote. And it's interesting, this quote is from Russell Wilson, who's a quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. But it just captures how we feel about what needs to change among us as a society. And the quote is, if we start being honest about our pain, our anger, and our shortcomings, instead of pretending they don't exist, then maybe we'll leave this world a better place than we found it.
I love that quote. It really sets a tone for where we're at. Our lived experience with our daughters is with anorexia. Everyone needs to have an understanding about eating disorders, symptoms, the need for early intervention, what to do if you think somebody is struggling. Mental health issues must be part of the conversation, and there is help. There's support. There's treatment. Research shows people can be genetically predisposed. Eating disorders are never a choice no one would choose. Characteristics with anorexia, the individuals tend to be perfectionist, sensitive, sometimes very rigid in their thinking. They're also highly successful. They're accomplished. They're driven. They're the friend that lights up the room. ED can begin at any age.
It also can begin at transitional times in life, right? Sometimes eating disorders are the result of stress or trauma or loss, but sometimes they just happen just between everyday occurrences, from going from grammar school to middle school, just people adjusting in adolescence, and sometimes when someone goes from high school to college, just some very normal times can be triggers for an eating disorder, just because people feel anxiety around new situations sometimes and they're not able to handle the change. Also, I'm a firm believer, and I know Ellen and Jack are too, that social factors and environmental factors are huge contributors.
You're bombarded by them every day.
Right.
Well, and whether it's the environment at school, at home, there's trauma, there's an illness in the family. So that environment takes on a big arena that it's where we live our life.
Yeah.
Right. And often people who have an eating disorder aren't comfortable sharing it. They're not, they have this driven, perfectionistic attitude, and they don't want to share their weakness because they're ashamed, and there's stigma around all mental illness, and they're afraid to ask for help. And by the time you recognize something is going on, it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, it's estimated that 30 million Americans suffer from an eating disorder and 70 million worldwide. But again, there's so many that don't come forward, don't come out and ask for help. So,
And sometimes when they do come forward and get treatment, they don't follow through and get the full treatment that's needed.
right.
And what people don't often understand is that people with eating disorders and anorexia often are people that are very empathic and compassionate towards other people, but
Absolutely.
they're not always so good at expressing their own emotions. And that's part of why the illness can manifest.
Well, it's a coping mechanism.
Right.
Yeah. It's about control. So,
Right. And the more people have anorexia or an eating disorder, but certainly anorexia is the most deadly eating disorder, they lose their sense of self and they forget who they are.
Well, and they isolate. They just, that's what Emily did. She just isolated in her bedroom with the shades drawn, dark room, 24/7 pretty much.
Well, at the end, it didn't start out
No, it
that
didn't
way. It
start out
starts
that
out
way.
very insidiously, but
Right.
that's what can happen.
When it becomes that chronic, enduring.
And because
For
people
years.
can't express their emotions, that by them not eating, it helps them feel more in control, and that's hard for people to understand. But that's what happens, and that's what people will tell you. So anyway, we hope that you will listen with an open heart. We're going to share a little bit more about our journeys with you with our daughters, and I think you'll maybe learn a few things that you didn't before. And everybody knows somebody with an eating disorder. So if you're not directly affected or it's not in your family, there's somebody who you know who is struggling, and it's not always obvious. Ellen, do you want to start with your story? Tell us a little bit.
Absolutely. The stories need to be told. Katie was 11 when she was diagnosed with anorexia. My other daughter was 8. Dealing with anorexia and realizing it is a mental illness impacted all of us. My husband, myself, my daughters. Anxiety is so common. Both my daughters have struggled with anxiety. My children's father was an alcoholic and struggled with depression. Each of us was impacted, but in different ways. My anxiety was diagnosed probably 20 years after it should have been. So I struggled for 20 years. And as we have this conversation about eating disorders, we often hear how people struggled for 10, 20, 30, a lifetime with an eating disorder. And we're here to start the conversation so that this does not continue. No one should struggle for years and years. We now realize my younger daughter probably struggled with issues with anxiety since she was a young child. Katie was never diagnosed with anxiety. Following her death from anorexia at age 25, I now understand anxiety was very much a part of Katie's struggle. It was just never diagnosed or known. We didn't realize.
I'm so sorry for what you've been through and for what we've been through.
But what our kids went through.
Oh, but you know,
I mean,
that's just it, because all I can think about now is just what Emily went through. I mean, when you're living it, and it's a hard journey, and you're trying everything that you can, and there's days where you're on top of things, and there's days where you're tired and overwhelmed, but now when I look back, all I can think about is how Emily must have felt every one of those days. You know, I just put myself exactly where she was and how awful it must have been. No, we knew that at the time. It's just personified now when I think about it. And
physical and emotional pain and is just beyond comprehension.
Well, we're just so focused, and all our time went into just trying to save her, but looking back, I mean, it just had to be horrible, and I know it was horrible to live through that for her.
Well, what people don't realize is that anxiety is often part of the struggle with eating disorders, depression, suicide, substance use disorder, alcoholism. You go right on down the line. And what can begin as just a little bit of an anxiety can turn into so much more. And sometimes you wonder, was the anxiety there at first, or did the anxiety come, when people were having trouble with an eating disorder? So just important to pay attention when you notice differences. So, Ellen, when you first had concerns about Katie and her having an eating disorder, were you taken seriously?
No. We faced dismissal and blame. Recovery was elusive. And when there's dismissal and blame, the eating disorder thrives. After 3 years, Katie was in sustained recovery, and that lasted for almost 8 years. After graduating with honors from the high school at Syracuse University, I noticed some changes when she came home at Thanksgiving. Oh no. So I asked her, "Is everything okay? Are you happy?" I was so concerned, but I was met with denial, anger. Katie told me, "I can take care of myself. I'm 22 years old. Back off, Mom." The eating disorder had returned with a vengeance and never let go. Katie's heart stopped at age 25 after 3 years of restriction. Family, friends, loved ones were all at a loss. We couldn't understand. How? Why? What happened? How did we not know? The grief led us on our journey to create KMB for Answers.
Ellen, I know it's not easy to rehash everything, but your honesty in our journeys will help others to know that they're not alone. I know that you've had so many people through your foundation reach out to you, and you've done so many good things for so many people. And it's just, again, you've created a safe space for people to contact you. So can you tell us a little bit about that foundation that you're doing in honor to honor Katie?
I would love to. KMB is her initials, Caitlin Mary Bennett. And for Answers is we were all searching for answers. We just had so many questions and didn't understand. Our KMB is dedicated to awareness, education, training, research, and advocacy. We are passionate about starting the conversation and creating compassionate and supportive environments for anyone who struggles with an eating disorder, disordered eating, and body image. Recovery is possible. Help is available. Family is so important. Loved ones know the history and the details that can be critical to recovery and must be included in the conversation. Many times, individuals with mental health disorders lie, deceive, deny, isolate. All of this is part of the illness. It's not them being defiant. And we must raise the awareness of these type of behaviors so that we can help anyone who struggles.
Well, all those things, it's not Katie who's doing that. It wasn't Emily who's doing the denying and deceiving and isolating. It was the eating disorder telling them to do that.
Well, and they were so malnourished that nothing was firing right after when it's severe and enduring.
That's why it's so important to catch these early.
Absolutely. And they need, when they're that sick, the medical providers are not seeing the individual for who they are. That true spirited individual that we so adore is not reflected when the disease is ravaging.
They see them as often as a set of symptoms.
Yeah.
Yes.
And once they're an adult, they don't listen to the parents. And again, families are the best resource for the medical community. And a lot of times
We hold the details and the keys.
Right. Thanks for sharing that, Ellen. I know it's difficult, but you are making a difference, and your foundation helps to educate clinicians and therapists and nutritionists more on eating disorders, and that education is so important. I wish we could have known Katie. She sounds like an incredible girl, but when I think about it, our two girls brought us together, and it's a very special friendship for sure.
Well, and they were very similar in so many ways. When we talk about them as little girls and as teenagers and as adults, it's as if we knew them.
Right. I know. So many of the sentences could be just the same.
Yeah. I mean, when I listen to you and, Emily loved life. She loved family. She loved go on vacations, and her smile lit up a room. I mean, it's just the same scenario. And,
Yeah, just
Katie was a dancer. Emily loved playing the violin and playing soccer, and she was a great sister to her brother Matthew, and compassionate and understanding,
loving, caring,
sympathetic. She was the one that all her friends would come to for advice when they were having problems. And she graduated with honors from high school and college. Went on to become a doctor of pharmacy. Through an accelerated pharmacy program. And it wasn't until age 25 when, again, she came home for Christmas, and Linda kind of looked and saw her house, bare, bones sticking out of her shoulders, and was, she was diagnosed with anorexia. She dealt with it. She worked, and, but after a few years, when she was 29, it was affecting her more mentally, emotionally, and physically, and she wasn't able to work anymore. She took a medical leave,
But at that point, Jack, she was seeing her doctor and a counselor.
But she needed more help than was available, and
But it wasn't enough, right?
Wasn't enough, and she researched treatment centers throughout the country and found one in Utah that she wanted to go to, and she told everybody she was taking this leave. She told everybody she had an eating disorder, anorexia, and she was going to go get help. So she went to Utah, and about a week later, she called and said that they were sending her home. She gained 2 pounds. But the insurance company said she was a low normal body mass index, even though she had great insurance, and the center fought to keep her. They sent her home. So 10 days after, she's back home, and she was angry. Oh my God, she was so angry. I picked her up at the airport. She was crying, and
she was ashamed.
She told everybody and that she was going to get help, and then they sent her home. Said she wasn't sick enough to stay in treatment, but she knew she was. She needed treatment. And when she got home, she was denied coverage for outpatient treatment here. She, like Katie, was an adult, and she was adamant she had to do this on her own. So she threw herself back into work for about 6 months, and literally worked herself to the bone, and had to stop working. She was just too sick to continue.
These heartbreaking stories must be told, because people have to be aware that these eating disorders have deadly consequences, and they're not a joke. They're not a toy. Not a choice, excuse me. What happened after that? What did you do? She must have been felt so disappointed, so hurt.
Well, I think that was just such a pivotal time, and I think that if she'd have gotten the level and the length of care and different levels of care that she needed at that time, I think she would still be with us. But it didn't happen that way, and it was a roller coaster ride for our whole family. So after begging for help for her for 6 months, she finally did obtain treatment for 4 weeks' time, but then her insurance company stopped paying again when she, reached a certain weight, which was, not that much in 4 weeks. So
There was no continuum of care.
No.
You know.
She couldn't get care back here because her insurance wouldn't cover that, and she wouldn't let us help, and it was just very frustrating. But after that treatment, though, she did rally for a time, and she went back to work, but she still had the eating disorder, and she fell down a very slippery slope. So we tried everything we could think of, and we were advised to do. Emily remained in denial because her body and her brain were so malnourished. And it was so frustrating because HIPAA regulations allowed her to shut us out of her medical care, even though she was suffering with the psychiatric illness with the highest mortality rate and one that prevented her from nourishing herself, the most basic human instinct.
It's one of the most frustrating things in our journey is that when it was so apparent, when doctors were telling us our children, their heart could stop at any moment, but yet they were allowed to make life-saving decisions. Yeah. Like how sick do you have to be before somebody says the parent needs to know?
Right.
Well, I mean, in the hospital, a social worker came up to me and said, your daughter's an adult and she has the right to make bad decisions. And I just looked at her and I said, well, obviously she has, and so have you. And it's just, to this day, I can't believe that somebody said that to me.
Well, Emily struggled from the onset to the time of her death at age 35, where she passed in hospice care. It was 10 years, and she struggled every single day towards the last few years. She had major kidney damage, her heart was damaged, her colon and her other organs were all damaged. And
she was in pain every day.
She was just a shadow of herself, and she really suffered. And we tried everything. Even when she went into hospice, she was, how long was she in hospice for, Jack? Was it a
couple weeks?
She rallied for a few days of those couple weeks, and we were hopeful that sometimes people get out of hospice and get better, but she took a very deep dive after that, and she passed so quickly.
It still haunts me that we allow this to happen. In severe restrictive anorexia and nervosa, these are cases where you can tell by looking at them, Yeah. And just because they're an adult and they have the right to choose, we allow this suffering. It will forever and always haunt me.
Well, and it says people should take it as seriously as a cancer diagnosis.
Well, people thought when Emily was out, they thought she had cancer. That's what she thought.
I'm all about cancer treatment. I'm all about treatment for everything. But they wouldn't tell you if you had cancer. Well, you're a difficult case. That's all we can do.
Or the insurance company wouldn't say that. Well, your tumor shrunk by 70%, so you're good. We're going to stop treatment.
We're going to stop treatment now. And those are great analogies because it's true. It's really like a cancer of the mind.
Well, I said that at one point. I said it's just like we're dealing with the cancer in her brain.
But I just do want to stress that there's hope.
Oh my gosh,
there's hope, and we're making some strides along the way.
Well, we're living the hope. We're seeing it in the past 5-7 years. There's been so much information that's coming out that really is giving us hope and making us feel like things will change.
Yeah. But if love were enough, okay? If love, a caring, supportive family were enough, our daughters would still be here. We were present. We were fighting for them, and it still wasn't enough. So it shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But yes, there is hope now, and I think it will get better. But I think I've said this before, but we're making ripples, but we need waves to happen, just waves of change.
We need a tsunami.
Well, we're going to continue.
Mental health must change.
Yeah, we're going to continue this fight. So.
The truth is, we both had to beg for help. Devastating. You feel so alone. How can you have to be begging for someone to treat your daughter? The importance of a continuum of care cannot be understated. Our stories have so many similarities. Linda and Jack, I refer to my journey as to hell and back. We both face so many of the same frustrations, disappointments, shock. We knew the comprehensive care our daughters needed to have a chance at sustained recovery. But hard as we tried, we couldn't make it. The powerlessness is haunting. I was told when my daughter was truly in the depths of anorexia that her brain had been hijacked. Her behaviors were so irrational. It was like dealing with a terrorist. Strangely, that made sense to me. It was true. It helped me understand those behaviors that I just could not understand. And it's terrifying to say, that's not my daughter. Who is that? I love that you use the word hijacked in the title of your book, Emily, the story of a girl and her family hijacked by anorexia. It is an incredible book detailing your journey and your love for your daughter, Emily. And it has touched so many people, and people have reached out and said, basically, to me, it's like they're saying, you understand. Not many people do. Share with us, why did you decide to write it?
Well, when Emily was in hospice, she did meet with some friends from high school, and one of those friends, she told that she wanted her story told so that maybe it would help others and maybe it would help to change the system. So this friend told Linda that, and we wanted to honor her wish, honor her life, that her death wouldn't go just as another statistic. And just like you've done with K&B for Answers, for Katie, it keeps her with us, as I know your foundation keeps Katie with you too. It was a labor of love for 3.5 years writing it. Many tears, some laughs about some of the good times. He wrote it as a memoir, starting when Emily was a baby, so people would know who she was before the eating disorder took over.
And her writing is in there too. And she was an incredible writer.
She had to stop writing because she said
when she got so sick.
But she did some writing between 2009 and 10. And some of those writings are in the book.
And there's even some things she wrote when she was little that are in there too.
Oh yeah, there's some poems that we found. It was incredible. So since her passing, and it's our mission and our passion to spread the awareness. I just keep saying awareness and education, and hopefully that'll evoke some compassion and improve the care, and share some things we've learned along the way. We have learned so much. Unfortunately, it was too late to help Emily. When we began, we told ourselves that if Emily's journey can positively impact, just save one life, then all those tears and all that time that writing would be worth it. And
spent writing, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a lot of tears and
we've
investigation.
Received so many emails and letters and phone calls from people that have read the book and now feel safe to reach out to us. And when we get frustrated, because we want the system to change yesterday, but when we get frustrated and we get those cards, those letters, those calls, it's a blessing that keeps us moving forward.
And it really amazes me, people from all over the country and even beyond.
England and New Zealand. And
that this book has gotten to. And I just think it's wonderful that Emily is making a difference. And some of these people call I've had phone calls too, but it's mostly letters and emails. But they say how much Emily's story has impacted them. And it isn't just people that are calling about eating disorders. It's people who have dealt with addiction and substance use or an eating disorder themselves, or or if they were supporting somebody, a family member.
Because there's so many parallels in,
Oh, my-
in all
absolutely.
mental illness, no matter what
Yes,
it is. So,
and though I treasure every one of those emails and letters and some of the phone calls that I get, and it makes it all worth it. Those are really such a blessing. They really are. Well, I think right now we're gonna let Ellen tell us about the 9 truths, and we're gonna finish up with that.
We're getting close to the end of our podcast today. 9 Truths About Eating Disorders is based on Dr. Cynthia Bullock's 2014 9 Eating Disorder Myths Busted at the National Institute of Mental Health.
So the first truth to bust the myth is many people with eating disorders look healthy, yet may be extremely ill. People with an eating disorder may be an average weight, they may be underweight, and they may be overweight.
Number 2, families are not to blame and can be the patient's and providers' best allies in treatment. They're critical. And when we say families, it can be biological or chosen family.
Absolutely. Number 3, an eating disorder diagnosis is a health crisis that disrupts personal and family functioning.
There was just an article that Cindy Bullock, I just saw it, that she posted, a healthcare crisis in America in treatment of eating disorders. And it was a very powerful article that says it all.
Well, both of us saw our daughters' lives suspended for not a couple months, not a year, but years.
Yeah. This is one myth that needs to you need to listen to this. Eating disorders are not choices, but serious biologically influenced illnesses. I can't tell you early on how many people said, just make her eat. Well, that's not what it's all about. Food is medicine. There's no question. And, when they get so physically unstable, they need to be nourished and stuff. But there's so much more after that needs to happen. The continuum of care needs to happen.
Number 5, eating disorders affect people of all genders, all ages. 8 to 80 is a range we often use.
I heard it's down to 5 now.
I know, it's
5 to 8.
terrifying. It's in 1999, age 11, when Katie was diagnosed, that was considered young.
Yeah.
So fast forward now. Race, ethnicity, body shape, weight, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status. Eating disorders do not discriminate.
Number 6, eating disorders carry an increased risk for both suicide and medical complications. About 26% of people with eating disorders attempt suicide. That speaks volumes right there about how devastating having an eating disorder can be.
And again, it affects every organ of the body when it's not being having the nutrition that the body needs. Number 7, genes in the environment play important roles in the development of eating disorders. And it's said that genes load the gun and the environment pulls the trigger. And the environment, the toxic environment, is all around us every day, 24/7.
Yeah, when I talk at high schools, one of the number one comments that I get in terms of what's the stress at school, it's bullying.
Yeah.
Being mocked and picked on. And yeah. All right. Number 8. Genes alone do not predict who will develop an eating disorder. It helps us understand some people are predisposed based on genetic factors and may develop an eating disorder, but genes alone don't determine.
Number 9, full recovery from an eating disorder is possible.
That is so important to remember. Full recovery is possible. We, unfortunately, lost our children, but
we see lots of people
Yeah.
who have achieved recovery and some who are still working on it, but there is much hope if we work together and stop the stigma and band together and the changes that need to happen, we're bringing them to light. And
People in recovery are some of the most fierce advocates and work alongside us when we lobby and when we raise awareness. So recovery's the answer.
Yeah.
Therapy and support groups can help the individual learn how to deal with and express their emotions in a healthy way. There should be no judgment. There should be no shame associated with any mental health illness. We are all more alike than we are different. And we believe mental health issues affect every family somewhere along the line. No one's immune. Linda, will you please read the short writing that Emily wrote, which is kooky.
from the book, yeah, I can do that, yeah. So Emily wrote this after she was diagnosed with anorexia, and these are her words. My life shattered around me like broken shards of glass. I couldn't just sweep them away with a broom. I had to pick up the pieces, one by one, and figure out how they fit back together. Little did I know, grabbing hold of each piece and trying to put my life back together was going to hurt like hell. She didn't tell us that. That was written in her journal. And people are so good about hiding their emotions. So just remember that when someone is shattered for whatever reason, for whatever crisis they're going through, they may not be telling you at all or how much they're hurting or if they're even hurting at all. So connection is so important. It's underrated.
COVID has told us in the last almost year and a half how important connection is. The lack of connection it's just been devastating to everybody, but the mental illness has just been, again, the increase in suicides is astounding.
So connection is underrated, like I said, but connection is also the thing that can renew hope and become a bridge to recovery. Compassion, encouragement, and presence are priceless gifts you can give to someone who's hurting, and it will help them to be able to pick up the pieces. We were once shattered, and we're picking up the pieces, and we hope this podcast helps you in whatever you're dealing with.
So thank you again for tuning in today, and we'll be so grateful if you could review this podcast on the platform you're listening to it on, and also let others know about it on social media. Thank you for listening and helping us to get the word out. Once shattered, picking up the pieces.
In our next episode, we will discuss the insidious ways an eating disorder can begin and how complex they can become. Thank you so much.